Welcome to Stoic Love, where we explore the quiet, unexpected ways the heart can find its way home. At 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, a knock at my door changed everything. I wasn't ready. I wasn't even dressed properly, and I certainly didn't expect it to be him. My quiet neighbor with tired eyes and hands that looked like they carried 1,000 stories. What happened next unraveled a part of me I thought had long been tucked away, forgotten behind a locked door to which I'd long ago lost the key. Before we dive in, do me a favor and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments below. I'm always amazed at how far these stories can travel and the community we build here. Now, let's begin. It had been one of those quiet autumn nights that almost felt staged, too still, too perfect for its own good. My little house sat at the very end of our cul-de-sac, a silent ship in a calm sea of suburbia. All the lights were off, except for the single warm amber glow from the reading lamp in the corner of my living room, casting long, soft shadows that made the familiar space feel both cozy and vast. I was curled up on my couch, tucked into my favorite worn robe, a glass of Cabernet nearly forgotten in my hand as it warmed to room temperature. I was flipping through a photo album I hadn't opened in years, a relic from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. There's something about photos of your kids when they were young that hits you differently once the house goes quiet for good. The silence amplifies the memories, making them almost painfully vivid. My finger traced the glossy surface of a picture of my son, barely 7, with a gap-toothed grin and a T-ball trophy held proudly aloft. I could almost smell the scent of freshly cut grass and hear the tinny cheer of the other parents. I turned the page. My daughter, maybe 4, covered head to toe in finger paint, her face a masterpiece of blue and green streaks. I remembered the way her tiny hand felt in mine, the sound of her feet pounding on the stairs, the smell of pancake syrup and melted butter on Saturday mornings. You start to remember all of it, and you wonder, with a hollow ache in your chest, where all that time went. And more than that, you wonder where you went. That's the headspace I was in when I heard the knock. It wasn't a pounding, aggressive sound, not the sharp rap of a delivery driver in a hurry. It was just a knock. Soft, hesitant, 3 distinct taps that seemed to ask a question rather than make a demand. I glanced at the clock on the cable box. 11:43 p.m. It was far too late for deliveries, too late for any casual visitors. My heart gave a little jump, a flutter of surprise more than fear. My little cul-de-sac was the definition of safe. I stood up, the old photo album sliding onto the cushions, tightened the belt of my robe, and padded barefoot to the door, the old hardwood floors cool beneath my feet. I didn't even bother turning on the porch light. I opened the door just a few inches at first, peering out. My eyes adjusted to the dim, hazy glow cast by a streetlight far down the road. It was him, Arthur, my neighbor from 2 doors down, divorced, quiet, a man who seemed to exist in the margins of our neighborhood. In the 5 years I'd lived here, our interactions had been limited to the occasional nod across our freshly mowed lawns or a short, "Hey," as we pulled our respective trash bins to the curb on Sunday nights. Nothing more. He was just the quiet man in the beige house. His eyes, when they met mine, were tired, bone-tired. He was holding something in his hand, a small, dented metal toolbox that looked as old as he did. His flannel shirt was soaked through at the collar, a dark patch spreading down his chest. It looked like he'd been sweating, or maybe crying. In the dim light, I couldn't tell which. "Hey," he said, his voice almost too soft to hear over the chirping of the crickets. I'm so sorry it's this late. I wasn't sure if I should even knock." I blinked at him, the wine still humming pleasantly in my veins, making the moment feel slightly unreal. "Arthur, everything okay?" He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a gesture of deep uncertainty. "Not really," he admitted, his gaze dropping to the welcome mat. There was a leak. In my place. A bathroom pipe burst, and there's water everywhere. I tried calling my brother, but he's out of town for the week. I didn't know who else to ask." I hesitated for only a second, my mind processing the absurdity and the quiet desperation of the situation. Then I stepped aside, pulling the door wider. "Come in," I said. "Oh, don't just stand out there. Come in. Let me see if I have anything that might help." He walked in carefully, cautiously, like he was trying not to step on anything sacred. I watched the way his eyes scanned the room, a quick, sweeping glance that took in everything. He seemed almost surprised at how lived-in my home looked. The gallery wall of family photos, the scented candles on the coffee table, the soft throw blanket folded just so on the arm of the couch. It was the comfortable clutter of a life, a stark contrast to the sterile emptiness I imagined his house held. "I can get you some towels," I offered, already heading toward the hallway linen closet. "At least you can dry off a bit." He followed at a respectful distance, still clutching that little toolbox like it was a passport to a foreign country he didn't quite believe he was allowed to be in. "You okay?" I asked over my shoulder, the question coming out more from instinct than conscious thought. He paused in the hallway, and I stopped with my hand on the closet door. "Yeah," he said, but his voice was thin. I didn't think I'd actually knock. I almost turned around 3 times. Something in his voice, a note of raw, unguarded vulnerability, pulled me back. I turned to face him fully, the towels forgotten for a moment. He was just a man, standing in a stranger's hallway, looking utterly lost. There was a pause, one of those thick, meaningful silences that says more than 1,000 words ever could. "I'm sorry," he said, finally looking at me again. "I know this is weird. Me, showing up like this." "It's not," I replied instantly, and then amended with a small smile. "Well, maybe a little, but not in a bad way. It's just unexpected." He managed a faint smile in return, a brief flicker of light in his tired eyes. "You always seem so calm," he observed, "like your house is always this quiet, peaceful place. I see the lights on when I get home late." I don't know. I wish I had that. I pulled a stack of old fluffy bath towels from the closet and handed them to him. "It's quieter than I'd like most days," I admitted, the truth of it surprising even me. His eyes met mine then, and in that moment it hit me with absolute certainty. He wasn't just here because of a leak. Not really. The broken pipe was just the excuse, the key that gave him permission to turn the lock on a door he'd been wanting to open. This was about something else, something he didn't have the words for yet, or maybe something he couldn't bring himself to say without sounding foolish. "You want to sit for a minute?" I asked, motioning back toward the living room couch. "Dry off? Catch your breath?" He hesitated, his eyes flicking from me to the couch and back again, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Okay," he said, "just for a minute." I poured him a tall glass of ice water and sat in the armchair across from him. The distance between us felt both huge and not nearly enough. We talked at first about the leak, about unreliable plumbing and the joys of homeownership. Then we talked about the neighborhood, the changing seasons, the old oak tree that was probably going to come down in the next storm. And then, surprisingly, we started talking about ourselves. Arthur told me, in a halting, quiet voice, how long he'd lived alone since his divorce. He said he hadn't meant to stay in that house for more than a year, that it was supposed to be a temporary landing spot, and now, somehow, it had been 8 years. He confessed that sometimes, on the loneliest nights, he just sat in his garage with the door open, just to feel less alone in the house. And in return, I told him things I hadn't meant to share with a near stranger either. I told him about my grown kids, a son in Oregon and a daughter in Florida, and how their texts and emails felt more like calendar updates than real, meaningful conversation. I told him about how I hadn't been touched in any meaningful way since my ex-husband remarried 3 years ago, and about the last disastrous date I went on, where the man asked if I was still adventurous at my age. We both laughed at that, not a hearty, joyful laugh, but the tired, shared laugh of two people who understood the subtle indignities of middle-aged loneliness. Then the silence came again, comfortable this time. He looked at me, his voice barely above a whisper. "I almost turned around halfway up your driveway." "Why didn't you?" I asked softly. He shrugged, a small, helpless gesture. "I don't know," he said. "I guess I just wanted to be near someone who didn't make me feel like a problem that needed to be solved." There it was again. That aching, brutal honesty that only seems to show up late at night when the world is asleep and all our defenses are down. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. "I get that," I said. "I really do." He leaned his head back against the cushion, his eyes closing for just a moment, as if he were letting the quiet of my home wash over him. "You ever wonder," he asked, his eyes still closed, "if maybe we're all just walking around pretending we're okay until someone finally notices that we're not?" I didn't answer right away. I just watched him. I watched the way his hands, though strong and calloused, trembled just slightly in his lap. I watched how he looked older up close, the lines around his eyes deeper, but somehow more fragile too, and something about that fragility, that unguarded moment of surrender made me want to protect him, and maybe, just maybe, let myself be seen too. "Yeah," I finally said, my voice as soft as his. "I wonder that all the time." We sat like that for a long while, no noise but the soft electric hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old house settling around us. He didn't make a move, didn't try anything, and yet something profound shifted in that space between us. It wasn't about romance, not yet. It wasn't just about loneliness, not only. It was about two people, two grown, scared, beautifully worn people, accidentally finding a moment of grace with each other in the middle of a sleepless night. I didn't know what would happen next. I had no idea. But for the first time in a long, long while, I wasn't afraid of the question. The first hint of morning light crept in slow and shy, brushing pale gray stripes across the hardwood floors and illuminating the forgotten, half-empty wine glass on the end table. I stood in my kitchen, barefoot, my hands wrapped around a warm coffee mug, watching the steam curl up into the quiet air. Arthur had left just before dawn, a silent, respectful departure as the birds were just beginning to sing. We didn't hug, we didn't even touch, but something of him stayed behind. Not his presence exactly, but the shape of it. His quiet voice, his tired eyes, that half-confession he didn't quite finish. You ever wonder if maybe we're all just walking around pretending we're okay? I hadn't slept a wink after he left. Not because I was unsettled or afraid. Quite the opposite. My body and my mind felt still for the first time in months, maybe years. It felt like someone had quietly opened a window in a room I hadn't even realized was suffocating me. And yet, I'd also felt completely and totally unprepared. This wasn't the kind of feeling that gets folded up neatly and put away for later. This wasn't just about helping a neighbor with a broken pipe. Something deeper, something ancient and dormant, had stirred within me, and I had no idea how to unstir it. Hit that like button if you believe the smallest gestures of kindness are often the most meaningful and can change everything. The next few days passed in their usual, predictable rhythm, yet everything felt different. I went grocery shopping, pushing my cart down the familiar aisles, but the bright colors of the produce seemed more vibrant. I answered emails from my daughter that sounded more like calendar updates than real conversation, but this time it stung a little less. I half-heartedly cleaned the guest room my son used to occupy, but the emptiness felt less like a void and more like space. But every evening, right around the time the sun dipped below the neighbor's giant oak tree, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I found myself looking out the window, wondering if I'd see him again. Arthur didn't knock, not that night, and not the next. I told myself it was for the best. It was a one-time strange middle-of-the-night event. But on Thursday, just after sunset, I saw him walking his dog, an old, sweet-faced Labrador I later learned was named Gus. He glanced up as he passed my house, saw me standing by the window, and offered a small, almost guilty-looking wave. Before I could think twice, before I could talk myself out of it, I opened the front door. "Hey!" I called out, my voice gentle so as not to startle him. He stopped on the sidewalk, a little surprised, and raised a hand in greeting. "Hey!" "Sorry," he said, gesturing vaguely with the leash. "I wasn't going to bother you." "You're not bothering me," I smiled, tugging my sweater tighter around my waist against the evening chill. "Want to come in for a bit? Or, sit on the porch?" He hesitated for a long moment, a silent debate playing out on his face. Then he nodded. "Let me just drop Gus off. He gets cranky if he's not fed on time." 15 minutes later he was back, hands clean, shirt dry this time, and his eyes a little less weighed down by the world. We sat on my porch swing, a cool breeze rustling the wind chimes that had been silent all summer. "I've been thinking," he said after a long, comfortable moment had passed between us, "about the other night." I looked over at him. He wasn't looking at me, but down at his hands, which were resting on his knees. "I wasn't lying about the leak," he clarified. "That really did happen, but I didn't really need help with it. I had it fixed in 10 minutes. I said nothing, just waited, letting him find his way to the truth. "I needed someone to talk to," he finally admitted, his voice low. "Someone who wouldn't look at me like I was broken for just needing that." "You didn't seem broken to me," I said honestly. He looked at me then, a flicker of something like relief in his eyes. "I think that's why I came back." A soft, unexpected flush warmed my cheeks. "I think we've all been there," I said, "trying to carry too much all by ourselves." He smiled, a genuine, full smile this time that reached his eyes. "I didn't expect you to get it." I laughed, a light, easy sound, and gently nudged his knee with mine. "I'm not as mysterious as I look." He glanced down to where our legs had briefly touched, then back at me, his gaze slower this time, more deliberate. "You live here alone?" he asked. "Yeah, no pets, not since my old terrier passed a few years ago. My daughter keeps asking me to get a cat, but I think she just wants me to have someone to talk to when she forgets to call for a week." He chuckled. "I've got my brother, but he's more interested in racing bikes than returning phone calls." We were quiet again, but it felt easier now, like we were two people remembering how to just be near someone without needing to perform or pretend. "Why'd you get divorced?" I asked before I could stop myself, the question too bold, too soon. He looked out toward the dark silhouettes of the trees. "She wanted more," he said simply. "More excitement, more travel, more everything. I couldn't figure out how to give it to her. I think I just shut down. And by the time I realized I missed her, she'd already moved on." I nodded, understanding that feeling all too well. "Do you miss her?" I asked. "Sometimes," he said with surprising honesty. "But not the marriage. I think I mostly just miss having someone in my corner, someone to notice when I'm not okay." There it was again, that soft, vulnerable ache. "I think you're better at being seen than you give yourself credit for," I told him. His eyes found mine again, holding my gaze longer this time, deeper. "You make it easy," he said. I felt that in my chest, the kind of compliment that wasn't about looks or charm or wit. It was about presence, about mattering. The wind picked up, and I instinctively wrapped my arms around myself. Without a word, Arthur stood, disappeared inside my house for a second, and returned with the throw blanket from my couch. He draped it carefully around my shoulders, his hands brushing the side of my neck as he did. The contact was brief, feather light, but it was enough to stop my breath. I looked up at him. He was still standing there, just watching me with that same quiet honesty from the other night. "I don't want to mess this up," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "You're not," I replied, my own voice just as soft. "You're showing up. That's more than most people do." He sat beside me again, this time a little closer. I didn't lean into him, and he didn't try to hold me, but we could both feel the pull, the kind of gentle gravity that builds not from desperation, but from recognition. Two people with their own invisible bruises, sitting side by side in the quiet, not trying to fix anything, just being there. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel too old, or too late, or too far past the chance for something meaningful. I just felt seen, and being seen, well, that's where all the best things begin. It takes courage to be that vulnerable. Don't forget to subscribe to Stoic Love for more stories that honor that kind of quiet strength. There's a moment right before something truly changes, when everything feels like it's holding its breath. The air itself becomes heavier, slower, charged with a potent, unspoken electricity. That's how it felt the next night. He didn't call, didn't text, but just before 10 o'clock p.m., I saw the porch light flicker on at his place, then off, then on again. It was a simple, unspoken signal, a question mark hanging in the dark. I stood at my window for a minute longer than necessary, holding a cup of tea I'd just made, my fingers trembling a little around the warm ceramic. I told myself it was just the chill in the air, but we both knew it wasn't that. I walked over to his house slow and steady, my heart beating a little faster with each step. I knocked once. He opened the door almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting right behind it. Arthur looked different. Not dressed up, not undone, just more awake. There was something behind his eyes, something open and present now, like he'd finally given himself permission to inhabit his own life. "Hey," I said quietly. "Hey." He stepped aside to let me in. His place was neat, meticulously so, but it was also profoundly empty, not in the physical sense. There was furniture, a framed art print on the wall, even a candle burning on the coffee table. But it felt like a space that had never been lived in completely. It was like a hotel room he'd been passing through for 8 years without ever fully unpacking his spirit. "I made coffee," he said. "Didn't know if you'd want any." "I'd love some." He poured 2 mugs, and we sat across from each other in the dim living room. The only light came from the small lamp beside the couch, casting long shadows that danced gently across the walls. "You don't have much on the walls," I observed. He gave a soft chuckle. "I've been meaning to hang more, but it never really felt like it mattered." "Does it matter now?" I asked. His eyes met mine across the coffee table. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think it does." We sipped our coffee in a comfortable silence for a moment. Outside, the crickets hummed their slow, low chorus. Inside, it was just the two of us, and the sound of things unspoken, waiting patiently to be said. "You know," I said, watching the rim of my cup, "I've spent a lot of years convincing myself I was fine being alone. That I preferred it, even." "Were you?" he asked. "Sometimes. But lately—" I paused, searching for the right words. "Lately, I've felt like I've been holding my breath for so long, I forgot what it feels like to really, truly exhale." He nodded slowly, a deep understanding in his eyes. "I know that feeling." I placed my mug down gently on the table. My hands were warm now, and I folded them in my lap, more to give them something to do than anything else. James leaned forward slightly. "I wasn't expecting you to come tonight." "I wasn't sure I would," I admitted. "What made you?" I looked at him fully, giving him the honest answer he deserved. I didn't want to wonder any more. That answer hung in the room like a delicate, shimmering thread, waiting to be pulled. He moved from his chair to the couch, sitting a little ways down from me, but enough that I could feel the space between us tighten. "I keep thinking about that first night," he said softly. Not just the conversation, but how quiet it was, how safe it felt, like the world had finally stopped spinning for a minute. "Yeah," I whispered. "I felt that too." His hand rested on the cushion just beside mine, not touching, but there, a warm, steady presence. "I haven't let anyone in like this for a long, long time," he admitted. "Me either," I confessed. "I keep waiting for the part where I mess it up." "You haven't." His voice dropped a little, becoming more serious. "But I want to be careful with you, Eleanor." Something in that, in those specific words, broke me open in a way I didn't expect. I blinked hard against the sudden warmth rising in my throat. No one had said anything like that to me in years. Not, "I want to be with you," or "I want you," but "I want to be careful with you." That was something else entirely, something truer. "I'm not fragile," I said, my voice a little thick. He smiled faintly. "I don't think you are. I just think you deserve gentle." That silence again, but now it was electric, humming with a beautiful, unspoken potential. I don't know who leaned in first. I don't remember if I closed my eyes or kept them open. But one moment we were looking at each other from a careful distance, and the next, his forehead was resting gently against mine. No kiss. Just that quiet, deliberate, breathtaking closeness. "I like this," I whispered, my breath mingling with his. "Just this." "Me too," he breathed back. His hand finally found mine, his fingers lacing through mine. Warm, steady, no rush. We stayed like that for what felt like a lifetime, just sitting, just breathing the same space, our hearts beating in a slow, steady rhythm. I think we were both afraid that if we moved too fast, the spell might break, and neither one of us was ready for that. Eventually, I pulled back slightly to look at him. "I should go," I said gently. He didn't try to stop me. "Okay." But he walked me to the door, and when I turned to say goodbye, he surprised me, not with a kiss, but with a question. "Can I see you again? Not just by chance, on purpose." I smiled, a real wide smile. "I'd like that." He nodded, his hand brushing mine again, slower this time, a deliberate final touch. And then I walked home under the starry sky, not because I didn't want to stay, but because something in me needed to hold on to this moment, to remember it exactly as it was, simple, real, honest. By the time I got back inside my own quiet house, I realized I was smiling without even noticing it, not because anything grand or dramatic had happened, but because for the first time in years, I had something to look forward to, someone to look forward to. What's the best simple meal you've ever shared with someone special? Let me know in the comments. A week passed, maybe 8 days. I lost count. It wasn't one of those whirlwind romances you read about in magazines, the kind where everything happens at once in a passionate blur. No, this was slower, softer, a kind of gentle unfolding that didn't ask for permission, just time. We started taking walks in the evenings, after the heat of the day had faded. Sometimes we'd talk about nothing of consequence. Dogs we used to have, favorite old diners that don't exist anymore, childhood stories that made us laugh so hard we'd have to stop walking and catch our breath. Other times, we talked about the big stuff. Regrets. The years we wasted trying to be what other people wanted us to be. The long, quiet ache of loneliness that doesn't scream, but settles deep into your bones. Arthur had a habit of glancing at me when he thought I wasn't looking, like he was still trying to believe I was real. and sometimes I'd catch myself doing the same, watching him laugh or rub the back of his neck in that slow, thoughtful way he had, and wondering how I ever missed him living just 2 doors down all these years. One night, after one of our walks, he lingered on my porch a little longer than usual. The cicadas were loud that night, filling the warm August air with their rhythmic, pulsating chorus. "I've been thinking about something," he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I leaned against the railing, my hands tucked into the sleeves of my sweater. "That sounds serious." He half smiled. "Not serious, just honest." I stayed quiet, giving him the space to find his words. "I don't know what we're doing," he began. "I mean, I know what it feels like. It feels good, it feels real, but I don't want to mess it up by rushing or assuming things." I tilted my head. "You're not rushing. I think we're exactly where we're meant to be right now." That seemed to ease something in him. His shoulders softened, and he stepped a little closer. "I just want to be clear," he said, his voice earnest. "I like you, Eleanor, not just as someone to pass the time with. I look forward to you. I think about you more than I probably should." I felt the corners of my lips lift. "That's a nice problem to have," I said softly. "I haven't done this in a long time," he admitted, his gaze steady on mine. "And I'm not perfect. I might forget to call when I should, or say something awkward, or shut down when I don't mean to." "I'm not asking for perfect, Arthur," I replied. "I just want honest, real, present." He nodded, and for a moment we just stood there in the golden ring of light cast by the porch lamp. Then he reached for my hand, not out of impulse, not to prove anything, but just because he wanted to, and I let him. That night, he didn't go home right away. We sat on my couch, legs brushing slightly, our hands still linked, and we talked until past midnight about things that didn't need to be profound to be meaningful. Grocery store annoyances, TV shows we'd both fallen asleep watching, the odd comfort of wearing the same sweatshirt 3 nights in a row. At some point, I rested my head on his shoulder. He didn't shift or flinch. He just adjusted his arm so I could settle in more comfortably. It wasn't romantic in the way we're taught to expect when we're young. There were no grand gestures or background music swelling, but in its own quiet way, it was everything. Comfort, trust, peace. Later that week, we had dinner at my place. I made roasted chicken, the kind my mother used to make. He brought wine and flowers, daisies in a slightly too tall vase. He told me he'd Googled flowers that don't mean too much too soon. I laughed so hard I nearly burned the carrots. After dinner, we sat on the porch again, our chairs close, our feet touching. We watched the stars appear one by one until the sky became something vast and silent and full. "Do you think this could really become something?" he asked, his voice soft in the darkness. "I think it already is," I replied. He looked over at me then. "Are you scared?" I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to say it right. "I'm scared of getting used to something this good only to lose it," I confessed. "But I think I'm more scared of not letting myself have it in the first place." His eyes didn't leave mine. "Then let's just be here," he said. "Every day. No promises we can't keep. Just showing up." I nodded. "That's enough." And it was. We never labeled it. We didn't need to. What we had was ours, defined not by declarations but by presence. Arthur didn't try to rescue me from my life, and I didn't try to fix him. We just made space for the quiet, for the healing, for the slow, unfolding joy of companionship that comes when you stop looking for a fire and start noticing the warmth. The funny thing is, it wasn't some explosive, life-altering moment that changed everything. It was the quiet collection of all the small ones. It was the way he remembered I liked my coffee with honey, not sugar. The way I folded his sweatshirt and placed it on the back of the chair without needing to be asked. The way we both started sleeping with our windows cracked open at night, because we knew the sound of the crickets would now always remind us of each other. Some nights we still just sit on the porch watching the sky. We don't always talk. Sometimes we just exist beside one another, breathing in the same rhythm, grateful that life, however unexpectedly, brought us to this quiet, beautiful now. And when people ask me what happened that night when he knocked on my door, I tell them the truth. I wasn't ready, but maybe that's how all the best things start. Not when we're ready, but when we're willing. Willing to open the door, willing to stay for a while, willing to be seen. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to open the door.